أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله اللهم صل وسلم وبارك على محمد وأزواجه وذرياته وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين ومن تبعهم بإحسان إلى يوم الدين أما بعد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, my dear brothers and sisters, wherever you may be. I'm your brother, Reza Abdul-Jabbar, greeting you from Invercargill, New Zealand. My dear brothers and sisters, life throws challenges upon us, and these challenges may be trivial, and it can be difficult, and sometimes most difficult. I'd like to share with you tonight, this evening, 8 o'clock in the evening, New Zealand time, some of the ways that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the path and the way to get out, an escape route, if you want to call it that. One of the ways that we know of the Quranic verses that were the du'as, the supplications of the prophets alayhim salatu wasalam that have come before us, and they certainly were the best of examples. Tonight, inshallah, I want to share with you the dua that really benefits us when we live life and difficult moment comes and approach us, as if you can't see the light at the end of the tunnel, as if you don't know what more can you do. Once you've exhausted all effort, once you've tried your absolute best, your utmost in efforts, yet you don't know what more to do. What must we do as Muslims, as believers, as mu'min? What do we do? Ibrahim alayhi salam, at the time when he was young, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu narrated that possibly that he was only about 15 years old, a young boy really, a young boy, and Ibrahim alayhi salam, when he destroyed the idols of Namrud, and he left one, and then of course the rest of the people, they knew that he had done it. They put him through the prosecutions. The young Ibrahim went through so much against the most powerful king of his time, maybe even in his era, Namrud. So Ibrahim alayhi salam, did he fear this moment? Basically, he's got his back against the wall. He can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. There's simply no light possible emerging from the other end of the tunnel. Ibrahim alayhi salam simply had nothing else except to rely upon Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. When they built the biggest fire that the whole kingdom had ever seen, that prepared it for days and days. In fact, it's been burning for 3 days and 3 nights, according to some narrations. It's as big as the house, ready to throw Ibrahim alayhi salam onto that fire. In fact, they would have catapulted him into the fire because it's so big. My dear brothers and sisters, wherever you may be, situations like this, situations where you really do not see the light at the end of the tunnel, you just don't see the way out. What did the people before us and the best of the example before us, the Anbiya alayhim salatu wasalam, did in these circumstances, in this most difficult of moments, in this trial that you just don't see the way out? You simply do not see the end of this tunnel. Simply no light. My dear brothers and sisters, wherever you may be, Ibrahim alayhi salam, he wasn't worried. He wasn't bothered with the situations. I want to picture there's a 15-year-old boy and his own father is on the side of the persecutions. Not even his father was with him. Yet he was calm. Yet he was easy. Yet he wasn't worried. What made this possible? Ibrahim alayhi salam recited this dua. Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. One of the most powerful dua, which we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will never let us go into despair, let alone be in the case or be in the state of hopelessness. Ibrahim alayhi salam went through the fire knowingly that he can rely unto Allah Rabbul Alameen. Ibrahim alayhi salam said, Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. Of course, you can go and say, Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil, ni'mal mawla wa ni'mal nasir. What does this mean? We know this dua. Many of us had memorized this dua. What does this mean? Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil is so profound. It's so deep. It's one of those dua that you have understood the meaning of it, then you will most certainly live life optimist, realist. In the most optimist of ways. Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. Ibrahim alayhi salam knew this. What it means, my brothers, my sisters, wherever you may be, it is sufficient. Allah for me. It's the ultimate of Tawheed. It is the ultimate of surrendering in this very moment. Wa ni'mal wakil. And Allah is the most exalted, the most perfect of wakil. Of course, wakil here is not just protector, but it goes beyond that. It also means the wakil whom you delegate. You delegate everything. Everything. And you know full well that whatever you delegate into Allah Jalaluh, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be your utmost, will be the most exalted, will be the most perfect of wakil. And in the old, in the current Arabic language, when wakil, it often referred to as a lawyer. And I know there are other languages that refer to lawyers as wakil as lawyer. What would one do when you have employed the best of wakil, the best of lawyer? One would sit down and rest and delegate the rest of the affairs to the wakil. My dear brothers and sisters, of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not just a wakil, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is al-wakil, the wakil, the most perfect, the most exalted of wakil. And we know with that, Ibrahim alayhi salam went into the fire, and the fire became the garden from the garden of paradise with fragrances, and it's a cool place. Unlike what Namrud and his people wanted it to be, a burning fire, it failed to do so. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has changed the fitrah of that fire that is normally hot, burning, into something that is blessing, that is cool, fragrance, something that is enjoyable. And Ibrahim alayhi salam went out of the fire unscathed. My brothers and my sisters, wherever you may be, this dua can only be narrated by those that understands what it means and have the greatest of relationship with Allah Jalla Jalaluh. One that do not know Allah Azza wa Jal will be in the state of despair. It will be impossible for him or her to be able to really delegate their affairs into Allah, the most exalted. In life, often we see no way out. In life, often we don't see the light at the end of the tunnel. None of us have not seen that. We all have felt something. We all have lived moments where we feel that simply there's no light. But my dear brothers and sisters, this dua is so proven. Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. Of course, if you are in the plural forms, it's hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. It's so proven, tried and tested. We call it today when something is, proven time and times again, tried and tested, right? In the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala told us to follow the examples of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam. Other than that, we are also commanded to follow the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam, the forefathers of the prophets. So we know the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam is also an example that us Muslims living in the year 2020 Gregorian calendar or the 1442 of Hijri, we still follow the traditions of Ibrahim alayhi salam. So why don't we take a lesson of this and really follow this? Because my next example would be that this dua was also the dua chosen by Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam when he was faced with some of the most difficult challenge upon his life. Also, this dua is also narrated from Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam on top of what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran. What I'm referring to with the case of Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the Battle of Ahzab. The Battle of the Ditches when 10,000 kuffar Quraysh were blockading the Muslims. The Muslims, according to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, possibly only around the 1500s of us Muslims, blockaded, under siege. No supplies could ever comes in. No other help. Blockaded by weeks and weeks and weeks until they had nothing left to eat except the leaves of the trees. In this moment, what dua that came out of their mouth? Rasulullah sallallahu, with all the knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has bestowed upon him, he chose Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil. Sufficient Allah for us. And Allah is the most exalted, the most perfect of wakil. And as a result of this, within the night, in a single night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent down the army that no eyes can see. وَجُنُودًا لَمْ تَرَوْهَا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in the Quran, and we sent upon them the armies that no eyes can see. There were the sandstorm. There were the tornadoes that they've never seen or felt before. It came upon these people. The 10,000 strong, fully armored Quraysh with the best of the weapons in its era. The most formidable of forces. Yet within the night they were scattered. They fled out. They were driven by these forces, by this army that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala sent that no eyes can see. So the Muslims rejoiced. They were ready. They were ready to fight till the end. But Allah Azza wa Jal saved them from this predicament. And without a single sword being unsheathed. Not a single sword. My dear brothers and sisters, this is the ultimate of Tawheed. Of course, I have to emphasize that this only applies to those that have tried and exhausted every single means of effort. They didn't just sit at home. They didn't just sit at home and not worry about these armies. They were ready. They prepared themselves to the absolute best and ready for whatever the circumstances that come to them. Yet, this dua is so powerful. We live today in this world that we see trials, tribulations, difficult moments. Sometimes we need to reflect. In fact, a mu'min must reflect at all times and look at some of the best lessons has taught us through the lisan, through the speeches of the Anbiya alayhim salatu wassalam. There's by no means that you sit at home and you don't worry and be in a state of despair and give up. Waliyadhu billah. A mu'min will never do this. A mu'min must try and try and try harder. The most exhaustion that you put into these trials to combat it, to overcome it, is an act of worship. It is an act of ibadah. But my dear brothers and sisters, once you understand and have the greatest of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then all this becomes such great weapons. قال النبي صلى الله عليه وسلم الدعاء السلاح المؤمن, that the dua, the supplications are the weapons of the believers. Wallah al-azim, this is so true. So us as mu'min, when we live in this world and we see no way out, we see no lights at the end of the tunnels, we don't go in a state of despair. We don't go into the state of not trying. We don't go into the state where we've forgotten what to do. We simply up the ante, do more. We get amped up and carry on doing what we know best and seek the best ways to overcome this. But it begins and it ends by asking Allah Rabbul Alameen of the most beautiful dua, the help from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. My dear brothers and sisters, wherever you may be, look at the case of Battle of Al-Ahzab. Those that have Allah, they have everything. Essentially, they have everything. Those that have everything else other than Allah, essentially, they have nothing. That's where it begins, and that's where it ends. If you do not have the help of Allah, the pleasing of Allah, the rida of Allah Azza wa Jal, then you are fighting a losing battle. You will never win, ya ikhwah. You will never win when you haven't got Allah Rabbul Alameen on your side. Let us learn tonight to get into the winning team, that first and foremost, we need to know Allah, have a great relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and have Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala into our sight. My dear brothers and sisters, wherever you may be, this situation also happened to Aisha radiallahu anha. We know Aisha radiallahu anha, Ummul Mu'mineen, is one of the greatest women that ever lived. Then her knowledge radiallahu anha was very significant. In the story of Slender, we all heard the story, maybe read the story of Slender, degrading towards a mother, Aisha radiallahu anha, one of the most difficult moments we can only imagine how difficult it must have been for Aisha radiallahu anha. With all her knowledge, with all the du'as, with all her memorization of the Quran and Hadith, what did Aisha radiallahu anha did in that difficult moments? Aisha radiallahu anha chose Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. It is sufficient for me, Allah, in this difficult times, in the story of Slender, greatest fitna for her. It is sufficient. I'm going to raise all my affairs. I'm going to delegate all my issues, my problems, my affairs, and all my conducts into Allah Azza wa Jal. And I'm going to let Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to take care of this problem for me, to manage this. And I can be assured that if I do that, Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil, that I know that I'll come out at the other end. I could see the end of the tunnel. I could see the lights at the end of the tunnel. And this is simply what Aisha radiallahu anha actually experienced. She said, I never thought that I was so significant in the sight of Allah that as a result of that, listen to this, my dear brothers, as a result of Aisha radiallahu anha really surrendered in full and left all of her affairs into Allah Azza wa Jal, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, she said, I never thought that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have revealed ayat, verses of the Quran for me. And it's over 20 verses of the Quran was revealed because of that obedience, because of that deployment of that dua. Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil. So profound, so great the impact of that dua that Aisha radiallahu anha said, I never thought that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have revealed ayat, let alone 20 plus ayat, that we the Muslims, we as Muslims, will carry on reciting this ayat al-Quran until the day of Yawm al-Qiyamah. Allahu Akbar. So powerful this dua. This is the dua that you will never go wrong. This is the dua that whenever you cannot see the lights at the end of the tunnel, that you must come back, revisit, memorize this dua, understand this dua, and make sure we use it. Those that understand dua silahul mu'min, that the dua, the supplications are the weapons of the Muslims, the weapon of the believers, must be those that also deploy this on a regular basis. Do your efforts, of course, and that is the trait of the Muslims. We don't sit down, do nothing, and then hope for the very best. That is not the attitude of the Muslims. All the beasts of the Anbiya alayhim salatu wassalam never did that. They never just not do anything and hope for the very best. Indeed, their trials were far, far more significant than the trials that we may ever come to encounter. My dear brothers and sisters, wherever you may be, but the lisan, the mouth of a person that can really recite this dua and really understand this and really leave all their affairs towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala must be one that really understand وقال الله تعالى ومن يتوكل على الله فهو حسبه. Whomsoever have the tawakkul into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, reliance into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, leaving their affairs into Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, فهو حسبه. And that is enough for him. Wallah al-Azim, that is enough for them. If we do this and really able to relieve this, we shall succeed in everything that we undertake. قال الله تعالى وَمَن يَتَقِ اللَّهَ يَجْعَل لَّهُ مَخْرَجًا وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. In another ayat, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us in the Quran, whomsoever have the piety, the taqwa, relies onto Allah Rabbul Alameen, يَجْعَل لَّهُ مَخْرَجًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up for him an escape route, a way out, solution to all our problems. Allah al-Azim, the difficulties that the Anbiya alayhim salatu wassalam that they went through are greater than whatever we have lived, have experienced, and will ever encounter in the future. Here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us, يَجْعَل لَّهُ مَخْرَجًا. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will open up an escape route. وَيَرْزُقْهُ مِنْ حَيْثُ لَا يَحْتَسِبُ. From ways that we never thought it existed. We won't even know where the escape route comes in. We don't even know where that solution may comes in. And we all have that problems, whether it is problems that we have at work, whether it is our families, whether it is our wives, whether it is our husbands, whether it is our children, whether it is our friends, whether it is our community, whatever it may be, whether it is our neighbors, whether it is our own selves. Believe you me, my dear brothers and sisters, Hasbi Allah wa ni'mal wakil, ni'mal mawla wa ni'mal nasir, that we must understand this and really look forward to understand more of this, not just memorize the dua, but actually make sure that we know what it means. We know what it means. We know what the historical lessons that the best people before us, the Anbiya alayhim salatu wassalam, the Sahaba radiallahu ajma'in, al-Mu'mineen, Aisha radiallahu anha, that have proven this dua. And times and times and times again, when you don't see the light at the end of the tunnel, don't be in the state of despair, yet come back into Allah Azza wa Jal. Deploy this dua, make it part of your arsenal, and look forward to the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And we know Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim, one that is intensely merciful and continuously merciful. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us among those that really strive extra hard to know Allah Rabbul Alameen. And once we know Allah Rabbul Alameen, that we engage in knowing Allah more and try to get the best, the greatest of relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and make whatever the sunnah of the Prophets alayhim salatu wassalam, whether it is an example of Prophet Ibrahim alayhi salam, or as the ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we endeavor to practice this and teach it to ourselves, to our family members, to our children, to our parents, to our cousins, to our friends and neighbors in the greater community, so that they may benefit. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the ability to taste the sweetest things of this dunya. Abdullah ibn al-Mubarak rahimahullah used to say that the greatest things of this dunya is to feel the sweetness of knowing Allah, the Almighty, Azza wa Jal. Wa barakallah fikum. Inshallah, that is all for tonight, and we look forward for some other engagement, my dear brothers and sisters. And if there is any questions, I will hang around for another minute, and then if not, I will end this live streaming. Wa barakallah fikum. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.